Hello everyone. Today, I invite you to join me in following the emotional story of a single mother, Ju Han, a woman who has endured countless hardships in life, but never stopped hoping. This is the journey of a poor woman, carrying her young child from a poverty-stricken countryside to a strange city, in search of her roots, in search of a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel for herself and her son. Ju Han was born and raised in a poor rural village where the sound of roosters crowing and the scent of smoke from evening cooking fires became a lasting part of childhood memories. But Han did not have the full, carefree childhood that other children did. From a young age, she lived with her frail grandmother, without a father, without a mother. People say that Han's parents left their hometown when she was just an infant, abandoning a tiny baby in a bamboo cradle on her grandmother's porch. No one knew who they were, and no one ever told her why they left her behind. And so, Han grew up with the painful, lingering question, who are my parents? As she got older, Han once believed that love could make up for the emptiness of her childhood, but fate once again played a cruel trick on her. Han got married at the age of 17 to a man she once believed was her whole world. But just a few months after the wedding, her husband fell into drinking and gambling. Every time he lost money, she was met with curses and beatings. Even during her pregnancy, he once kicked her to the cold floor, simply because she refused to give him money. In the end, unable to endure the violence and poverty any longer, Han made the decision to divorce him. She took her child and left that house behind, even though she had nowhere else to go. Ju Han lived in a makeshift shack. Every day was a silent battle, from scraping together enough money to buy rice, to seizing every minute she could to take on odd jobs, collecting scrap, washing dishes, doing whatever she could, as long as it meant she could buy milk for her child. Many nights, after her little son had fallen asleep, Han would sit quietly, staring out the window. The wind from the fields was bitterly cold, but even colder was the question she asked herself every single day. Is there a way out of this life? Han's son, little Tom, was just over a year old, but he already knew how to stay quiet when his mother cried. He would even reach out his tiny hands to wipe away her tears. Then one day, while rummaging through her grandmother's old belongings, Hanan happened to find an old photograph. It was a picture of a middle-aged man. After some time and quiet searching, Han discovered that the man in the photo was her father. Han held the photo in her hands. She didn't know for sure if it was real, but deep down, she knew. It was time to move forward. Not to run away from her poor village, not out of resentment for her hometown, but to search for a new door, a way out for herself and her son. And so, in the early light of dawn, Ju Han packed a few clothes, gathered her small savings, and carried her son onto a weekend-bound passenger bus, leaving the village behind. Life in the city was never easy for a single mother carrying a young child while searching for her roots. In those first days in this unfamiliar land, Ju Han had no idea where to begin. No acquaintances, no address, no phone, only an old, worn photograph of the father she had never met. She kept the photo carefully in her coat pocket, walking from one shop to another, down streets and around neighborhoods. Whenever she saw someone pause for a moment, she would approach, gently show them the photo and ask, "Have you ever seen this person before?" But everyone shook their heads. Some glanced at the photo and walked away. Others politely replied, "Sorry, I don't know." The photo was too old. The face had faded with time, and if the man in the picture were still alive, he would now be in his 60s or 70s, no longer looking the same. For more than 5 hours, Han dragged her weary feet through the crowded streets. Her little son, Tom, quietly followed her, never crying or fussing. But as dusk settled in, he began to grow tired. Han sat down on a stone bench by the roadside, holding him close, sighing but never complaining. She knew all too well. Complaining wouldn't help her find her parents. Complaining wouldn't fill her son's stomach or find them a place to sleep. This girl, frail, thin, carried a strength inside her that few could imagine. She gently stroked Tom's tangled hair and whispered, "Don't worry, my love. Mommy will find your grandparents. No matter how long it takes, I will try for you." Without resting long, she stood up again and carried him onward. The city lights began to glow. Shops were closing, but she and her son still had no place to spend the night. A little further down the road, Tom fell asleep in her arms. With no other choice, Han stopped in front of a roadside house with lights still on. She took an old mat from her bag, spread it gently on the sidewalk in front of the house, and laid her son down, covering him with a thin jacket. The night wind was cold. Her eyes stung with exhaustion, but she stayed awake, silently watching over her child. After a while, the house door creaked open. A middle-aged woman stepped out. Her eyes were cautious at first, but upon seeing the sleeping child and Han's weary face, she softened her tone and asked, "What are you doing out here so late at night?" Han bowed politely and briefly shared her story, from not knowing who her parents were to the journey of bringing her son to the city in search of family. The woman was silent for a moment, then said, "Come on in. It's too cold out here. Let the child sleep inside for the night. I wouldn't feel right leaving him like that." Han was overwhelmed with gratitude. That night, for the first time in days, she and her son lay in a warm room, with lights, with running water, and someone who was willing to listen to her story. After helping her son bathe and eat a little, Han finally felt the exhaustion settle in. She lay down beside him, her eyes still filled with worry, but now they also held a flicker of hope. Hope that tomorrow would be a new day, that even in this tough journey, there were still kind hearts in this unfamiliar city. Early the next morning, before the sun had fully risen, Ju-han quietly left the small house where the kind woman had offered her and her son a place to sleep. She didn't want to impose any further, and she didn't want to waste even a single day in her search for the blood father she had never met. The city was already bustling with life. People hurried to their jobs, while Ju-han silently slipped through alleyways and streets, her child in one arm, the old, crumpled photograph in the other. She stopped by a roadside barber shop. Taking the photo from her pocket with care, she handed it to the barber and gently asked, "Sir, have you ever seen this person before?" The man held the photo, squinting as he examined the worn face in it. He stayed silent for a long moment, then slowly shook his head, voice tinged with sadness. "I'm sorry, young lady, This face looks somewhat familiar, but I can't be sure. The photo is just too old. Once again, disappointment sank in. Her heart felt heavier with each failed attempt. So much hope was placed into each question she asked. Yet all she received in return were silences, shaking heads, and sympathetic glances. Leaving the barber shop, Han walked quietly under the increasingly harsh sunlight. Her legs ached, and little Tom had fallen asleep in her arms. She found shade under a roadside tree, sat down to rest, and gently laid Tom on her lap, using her knee as a pillow. Taking out a small milk bottle, she fed her son. Sweat beaded on her forehead, but her gaze wandered off into another world. A world of dreams slowly surfacing from deep within her soul. She imagined reuniting with her father, a man with graying hair, wrapping her and his grandchild in trembling arms. A small house, a simple yet warm family meal. A family, something she had yearned for throughout her entire childhood and youth. She leaned down and whispered to her son, "Tom, Mommy will make it happen. Even if I have to go everywhere, I will find your grandparents, so you can grow up surrounded by real family love." After resting for a while, Han stood up, slipped on her faded sun protection jacket, took a deep breath, and continued on her way. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but she didn't hesitate. She kept walking through crowded streets, eventually turning into a narrow road leading toward the outskirts of the city. Low rooftops, whispering bamboo groves, and birdsong at midday stirred a strange sense of familiarity in her chest. Her heart began to race. Somehow, deep down, she felt this could be the place. Maybe this was where her father had lived, or still lived. She wandered for a while longer, but still found nothing. She didn't know if she was heading in the right direction, but she believed that as long as she kept going, someone would eventually help her. Suddenly, she noticed a man named Jiang resting under a tree beside an old motorbike. He looked like a motorcycle taxi driver. She approached him politely and asked, "Excuse me, sir, do you know if anyone around here looks like the person in this photo?" The man looked at the photo for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah, I know a place, but it's a bit far. If you want to go there, I can take you, but you'll have to pay me the fare." Ju-han hesitated. She clutched the small bag she carried, mentally calculating every coin she had. "Is the fare expensive, sir? I don't have much money. I only came here to look for my birth parents." The man squinted at her for a moment, then replied quickly, "Just hop on. We'll talk about the fare when we get there." Trusting in this sliver of hope, Ju-han climbed onto the motorbike with her son. The engine roared into the midday heat, kicking up a trail of red dust behind them. She had no idea where they were going, or whether this man truly had any helpful information. All she knew was, if she stayed in one place, she would never find anyone. More than an hour passed. The motorbike continued speeding down unfamiliar deserted roads. Ju-han began to feel uneasy. She turned to ask, "Sir, are we almost there?" The man didn't answer. He just kept riding in silence. Han's instincts screamed that something wasn't right. She immediately said, "Please stop the bike. I don't want to go any further." The motorbike pulled over to the side of an empty road. Jiang turned to her, his voice cold.
Get off then, but you owe me 1 million. Han froze. 1 million? That was everything she had. Tearfully, she tried to explain. Please, I don't have that much. I came here just to look for my parents. I have a baby. Please have mercy. But Jiang wasn't listening. He started raising his voice, demanding payment. Han hugged her child tightly and stepped back, her eyes wide with fear in the middle of nowhere. Just then, another man approached from across the road, tall and well-built. He frowned at the scene and spoke firmly. What's going on here? What are you doing to her? Jiang was startled. He tried to stay calm, but his eyes betrayed his unease. Du Han cried out through her tears. Sir, I was tricked. I don't have any money. I'm just trying to find my birth father. The man, named Nam, a local resident, listened to her story, then turned and scolded Jiang. You're trying to extort money from a woman carrying a child on the side of the road? Should I call the police? Want to try me?
Jiang knew he was at a disadvantage. His eyes darted nervously before he muttered angrily, Fine, guess I'm just unlucky today. Then he sped off, leaving the mother and child alone on the dusty roadside. Du Han bowed her head and thanked Nam, her voice still trembling. Thank you. If it weren't for you, I don't know what I would have done. Nam looked at her, his expression softening. It's nothing. Are you okay? Where are you headed with the baby in this heat? Du Han simply replied, I'm looking for my parents. Do you know this place? After Nam gave her directions and shared some information about the father she had never met, Du Han felt as though she had been given a renewed sense of strength. She refused to allow herself even a moment's delay. Holding Tom in her arms, she set off again under the fading afternoon sun. The road ahead remained unfamiliar, winding, uneven, while sunlight filtered through gaps in the leaves, scattering broken patterns of light on the ground. She didn't know if she was going the right way, but kept telling herself, just keep walking. You'll get there. Tom had fallen asleep in her arms without her noticing. His tiny body swayed gently with every weary step, his head resting on her shoulder, lips slightly pursed, as if dreaming of something peaceful. Finding a patch of shade beneath a tree, Du Han laid him down carefully and spread out an old thin mat on the ground. She gave him his bottle and then opened the leftover bread from the morning, nibbling on small bites to ease her hunger. The evening wind blew gently, carrying the earthy scent of wild grass. Mother and child curled up beneath the tree for a short, much-needed nap. But it didn't last long. Tom suddenly burst into tears in his sleep, waking Du Han with a start. She quickly tried to soothe him. Packing their belongings into her small basket, she picked Tom up again and continued in the direction Nam had pointed out. The sky was darkening, and the sunset painted long streaks of crimson across the horizon. The air was growing chilly, and Tom began to cry from hunger, tightening the knot in Du Han's heart. She stopped at a stone bench by the roadside to rest. Looking around, she noticed a small house nearby with its lights still on. Hesitantly, she walked up and knocked gently on the gate. It creaked open, revealing a middle-aged woman with a kind face, though her eyes were slightly cautious at the sight of the unfamiliar mother and child. Du Han bowed politely. I'm sorry to bother you.
Could you please help me heat up this porridge for my child? He's hungry and it's all gone cold. The woman glanced at the child nestled into his mother's arms, his face pale and tired. She gave a small nod and opened the gate wider. Come in. It's hard to watch a child go hungry. Once the porridge was warm, Ju-han briefly shared her story. The woman, her name was Hang, sat quietly, listening intently, her eyes glistening at moments. When the story ended, she sighed and said softly, "A woman's life really is full of hardship. You and your child can stay here tonight. I have a spare room. Tomorrow I'll ask around the neighborhood. Maybe someone knows something." Overcome with emotion, Ju-han clutched her child tightly, her hands trembling. Thank you. Thank you so much."
A warm bowl of porridge, a temporary place to rest, and the kindness of a stranger felt to Ju-han like she had just made it through a storm. That night, as the entire city fell into sleep, Ju-han lay awake in the gentle darkness of the small room. The steady breathing of Tom beside her was the only thing that brought her peace. It wasn't a dream, nor anything grand, just a temporary roof, a hot bowl of porridge, and a woman who had opened her heart to a stranger in a moment of weakness. And somehow, that was enough to warm Han's heart. She closed her eyes and hugged her child tightly. The journey was far from over, but Ju-han knew that tomorrow, when sunlight streamed through that little window, she would rise again, take another step, and keep moving forward, no matter how many hardships lay ahead. Because more than anyone, she understood this. No one can live forever in the past, but everyone deserves a chance to search for their future. Will she find her birth parents?
Bữa cháo nóng, chỗ nghỉ tạm và tấm lòng ấm áp của một người xa lạ khiến Diệu Hân cảm thấy như vừa đi qua một cơn giông. Đêm ấy, khi cả thành phố đã chìm vào giấc ngủ, Diệu Hân vẫn thao thức trong bóng tối, dịu nhẹ của căn phòng nhỏ, tiếng thở đều đều của Tôm bên cạnh là thứ duy nhất khiến cô cảm thấy yên lòng. Không phải giấc mơ, không phải điều gì quá lớn lao, chỉ là một mái nhà tạm, một chén cháo nóng và một người phụ nữ xa lạ đã mở lòng trong lúc cô yếu đuối nhất. Vậy thôi mà đã đủ khiến tim Hân đấm lên. Và rồi cô nhắm mắt, ôm con thật chặt. Cuộc hành trình vẫn chưa kết thúc, nhưng Diệu Hân biết ngày mai khi ánh nắng chiếu qua ô cửa sổ kia, cô sẽ lại tiếp tục, sẽ lại đứng dậy và đi, dù có bao nhiêu gian nan phía trước. Vì hơn ai hết, cô hiểu không ai có thể sống mãi trong quá khứ, nhưng ai cũng xứng đáng có một cơ hội để đi tìm tương lai của mình. Liệu cô có thể tìm thấy cha mẹ ruột của mình không? Cùng chờ đón phần tiếp theo nhé!